Sometimes the call doesn't come in the form of thunder. It doesn't always show up in a burning bush or a bright light. Sometimes it's a whisper that comes in the middle of your breakdown. A whisper that seeps into the cracks of your insecurity and says, you were made for more than this. And let's be honest, that whisper is terrifying. Because when you've spent so long trying to survive, the idea of becoming someone different feels like betrayal. Betrayal of the version of you that learned how to smile through pain. That version of you that played small just to stay safe. That girl who clapped for everyone else while wondering if anyone would ever clap for her. But I came to tell you today, God is calling you out of that shadow, out of the survival mindset, out of the borrowed identities and generational labels. He's not calling you to be perfect. He's calling you to be present, to stand in the fire of your own becoming and say, I don't know where this is going, but I know I'm not going back. You see, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And that tug in your spirit, that ache when you see others walking boldly in their purpose, that's not jealousy. That's your soul remembering who you were created to be. You were never meant to shrink. You were never meant to edit yourself just to fit in rooms. You were sent to change. You were never meant to be a background character in your own life. You were born with oil on your name, with fire in your bones, with purpose stitched into your very breath. So who is God calling you to be? He's calling you to be the woman who speaks truth even when her voice shakes. The one who forgives, not because it's easy, but because freedom is too expensive to leave on the table. The one who breaks the curse, even if her hands are trembling. The one who builds, even if she had to start with nothing but faith. He's calling you to be healed, to be bold, to be whole. Not because the world said you're enough, but because heaven already did. So yes, the journey will be messy. Yes, there will be people who don't recognize you anymore. But when God calls you, He calls all of you, the broken pieces, the buried dream. The parts of you you thought were too damaged to ever be used. And He says, that's exactly what I want. So stop waiting for someone else to validate the fire you feel. Stop asking for permission to walk through doors you were destined to break open. The question is no longer, can you become her? The question is, are you willing to answer the call? Sometimes the call doesn't come loud, it doesn't come with lightning, and it doesn't show up on a billboard. It won't always be wrapped in clarity or convenience. Sometimes it comes as a whisper, a soft, holy nudge in the silence of your suffering. It shows up in the midnight hour when no one sees the tears that slip into your pillow. It shows up in that ache you can't shake. That tug in your spirit that says, this can't be all there is. Not in condemnation, not in shame, but in invitation. A sacred whisper that dares to interrupt your breakdown with the idea of a breakthrough. It might come in the middle of the kitchen floor while you're cleaning up everybody's mess but your own. It might arrive while you're scrolling through everyone else's highlight reel, feeling like you missed your moment. It may hit you right after you've settled into that. This is just how life is feeling. That whisper refuses to let you settle. It won't let you go numb. It keeps rising like breath from the ashes of everything that tried to bury you. It doesn't make sense to your logic, and it won't always feel comfortable in your heart, but that doesn't make it less real. You were never too far gone to hear it. Your mistakes didn't cancel it out. Your detours didn't delete the destination. That whisper keeps chasing you, not because God needs you to perform, but because He sees who you really are. Before the trauma, before the titles, before the image you built to hide the cracks, He sees the you that still has fire in her bones, even if it's just a flicker. He sees the you that cries when no one is watching, asking for more, even if you don't know what more looks like. You thought you were broken. God sees you as becoming. You thought you were stuck. God sees you being still long enough to hear Him. That whisper doesn't call the loudest one in the room. It calls the one who's willing to listen, willing to pause the distractions, even if just for a moment, willing to believe even after disappointment, willing to surrender the fear of the unknown for the possibility of a life that's actually yours. And let's tell the truth, that whisper can be scary. Because when you've spent so long trying to hold it all together, the idea of letting go feels like falling. When you've built your identity around being strong, the idea of vulnerability feels like weakness. But the whisper isn't calling you to pretend anymore. It's calling you to remember the dream you buried, the courage you silenced, the joy you convinced yourself you didn't deserve. It's calling you to trust what you sense over what you see. To trust that maybe, just maybe, there's still something sacred about your story. It comes while you're still in the mess, while the bills are unpaid, while your heart is still healing, while your faith is still shaky, while you're still figuring out who you are without the labels that once defined you. The whisper doesn't wait for you to get it all together. It speaks right into the chaos, right into the confusion, right into the storm, and it calls you by your true name. The name heaven has known you by since the beginning. The name your pain tried to make you forget. The name that's not bound by what happened to you or what you did to survive. It calls the little girl in you who stopped dreaming. The young woman in you who settled. The grown woman in you who's tired of pretending. The whisper comes to restore her voice, her hope, her vision. It doesn't demand that you leap. It just asks that you listen. That you lean in a little closer, that you dare to believe God speaks even in the silence, even in the grief, even in the doubt, that He's not waiting on a more polished version of you. He's speaking to the one you are right now. You see, the whisper doesn't always tell you the full plan. Sometimes it just asks, are you ready to move? It doesn't promise comfort. It promises purpose. It doesn't guarantee that people will understand. It only guarantees that obedience will unlock a version of you you've never met before. And that version, she's worth discovering. She's worth fighting for. She's worth awakening. The whisper doesn't rush you, but it won't leave you alone either. It'll keep speaking in the middle of your excuses, in the quiet of your routine, in the depths of your questions. It'll meet you where you are, but it won't let you stay there. You were never called to be perfect. That was never the expectation. The world might have handed you a list of things you had to check off before you felt worthy. Be flawless. Have it all figured out, smile through the storm, never let them see you sweat. But God never asked for your perfection. He asked for your presence. He asked for your willingness. He asked for your heart, even the parts that are still bruised, because He knows the truth. Transformation doesn't begin in polished spaces. It begins in raw, vulnerable, unfinished places, in places that still have questions, in rooms filled with fear, in the quiet corners where you show up not because you're ready, but because you're willing. You're not called to have all the answers. You're not called to live up to the pressure of looking like you got it all together. You're called to stand up when everything inside of you wants to sit this season out. You're called to speak even when your voice shakes. You're called to love even when your heart is guarded. You're called to walk forward with tears in your eyes and trembling in your hands. Because obedience isn't always neat. Faith isn't always tidy. Sometimes showing up is the holiest act of courage you'll ever do. God doesn't wait for you to fix yourself before He calls you. He calls you because He sees what's already inside of you, the strength that you overlook, the oil that your pain couldn't destroy, the fight in you that survived what should have broken you. He calls the real you behind the filter, the you beneath the mask, the you who's tired of performing for applause. He doesn't call you to perform. He calls you to become, and becoming is messy. Becoming is layered. Becoming requires that you let go of the need to be right and embrace the grace to be real. You weren't created to live under the weight of perfection. You were created to live under the breath of purpose. That means you'll fall sometimes. You'll question everything sometimes. You'll wish the process was easier sometimes, but none of that disqualifies you. In fact, it proves you're walking it out. It proves that you're engaged. It proves that you're present even when it hurts. Presence is more powerful than perfection because it keeps you connected to the process. It keeps you surrendered to the growth. It keeps you open to the shift. The presence you bring to this moment is what builds trust. Not trust in yourself, but trust in the one who called you. Because sometimes all you'll have is a whisper and a word. Sometimes all you'll feel is scared and small. But if you keep showing up, if you keep saying yes, even through your tears, if you keep leaning in when everything in you wants to pull back, you'll start to see that presence is where power lives. Not the loud kind of power that demands attention, but the quiet kind of power that changes everything without needing to be seen. It's in your presence that healing starts. It's in your presence that wounds get acknowledged. It's in your presence that fear meets faith and something begins to break open. You don't have to know how it all works out. You just have to keep showing up to the becoming. Keep showing up to the prayer. Keep showing up to the calling that doesn't make sense but won't let you go. Keep showing up for the dream that won't die, even when everything around you tells you it's too late. Because something happens when you show up authentically. Heaven recognizes real. Purpose is drawn to presence. Doors open for the one who's willing to walk through them messy. You don't need to wait until you've affixed your attitude. You don't have to wait until you feel fearless. You don't have to wait until you feel holy. Your flaws don't scare God. Your doubts don't disqualify you. Your journey isn't a detour. It's the very path God is using to shape you into someone who carries weight, someone who can pour from a deep place, someone who leads from the valley and not just the mountaintop, someone who doesn't just speak about grace but lives it. This generation doesn't need more perfection. It needs more presence. It needs more people who are willing to say, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm not hiding anymore. People who are willing to say, I still struggle, but I'm still called. Because that's where freedom begins, not in pretending, but in presence. The presence to admit your weakness, the presence to stand in your story, the presence to walk toward healing even when you still feel broken. And that's where the anointing flows, not over the person who's pretending to be perfect, but over the one who dares to be honest. There's something inside you that's been aching, tugging, pressing. It rises every time you watch someone else walk in their purpose. Every time you see someone doing what you've always dreamed of doing. You feel it in your chest like a longing you can't fully explain. Like a door you've been knocking on in silence. It's not envy. It's not jealousy. It's not comparison. It's the whisper of your soul remembering. Remembering that you were made for something more, that there's a part of you that hasn't had its moment yet, that God planted something deep within you long before life started telling you who you couldn't be. There's a divine memory in your bones, a knowing that goes beyond your current situation, beyond the labels they gave you, beyond the lies you believed. Something within you still believes, something within you still believes. Even if it's just a flicker, even if it's buried under fear and failure, even if the last time you tried you ended up hurt, that ache is holy, that ache is evidence. Evidence that purpose didn't die just because the timeline shifted. Evidence that God's plan didn't cancel just because yours fell apart. That ache is your soul trying to breathe again, trying to stretch again, trying to break out of the prison of settling and make its way into the light. It shows up when you're quiet. It visits you in the middle of the night. It speaks when you're alone with your thoughts. It challenges you when you try to convince yourself you're fine. When you say things like, I'm just too old now, or I missed my window, or it's too late for me. That's when it gets louder. Not to condemn you, but to call you. To remind you that divine assignments are not limited by age, background, or mistakes. They're limited only by your willingness to believe that what God put in you is still alive. And maybe you tried to silence it. Maybe you've been too busy, too distracted, too wounded to entertain the possibility. Maybe you've spent so long making everyone else's dream happen that you forgot you were allowed to have one too. But the ache won't go away. The ache keeps showing up because you were never meant to live a life that feels like you're watching someone else's. You were never meant to sit in the background clapping for everyone else while ignoring your own soul's cry to be seen. Your longing is not a mistake. It's not weakness. It's a signal. a signal that you were created with divine intention, that there's something only you can carry, something only you can birth, something only you can speak into the world. And the longer you ignore it, the more restless you become, because you can't unknow your purpose. You can't unfeel your destiny. You can try to numb it. You can try to bury it beneath responsibilities and fear and survival. But it won't stay buried for long, because what God planted will grow. Even if it has to push through concrete, even if it has to bloom in the dark. And it's okay if it scares you. It's okay if you don't know where to start. It's okay if all you have right now is a whisper. God doesn't need your confidence. He just needs your yes. He just needs you to admit that the ache is real, that the longing is divine, that the dream still matters, that there's still a fire inside you, even if life tried to drown it. And once you admit that, once you dare to say it out loud, something shifts. Heaven leans in. Doors begin to creak open. Alignment begins to take shape, because now you're no longer hiding. Now you're no longer pretending that you're fine in a life that doesn't fit. There's a version of you waiting on the other side of that longing. A version of you who's not afraid to start again. A version of you who's bold enough to believe that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it never will. A version of you who's willing to break the mold, to walk a path that doesn't make sense to other people, to trust what she feels more than what she sees. That version of you is waiting for your permission, waiting for you to stop silencing the very thing that makes you come alive. That longing is not a weakness. It's your compass. It's your fuel. It's your reminder that there's still something in you that hasn't been released. And it's not going to leave you alone until you stop pretending it's not there. Until you stop shrinking to make other people comfortable. Until you stop second-guessing the call because of your past. Until you stop convincing yourself that dreams are for other people. You are not other people. You are chosen. You are capable. You are appointed. An ache in your soul is your assignment knocking, not to torment you, but to invite you into the version of you that's been waiting to emerge. God doesn't reach for the polished, perfected versions of us. He reaches for the real, the raw, the ones who know what it feels like to break in silence and still show up anyway. The ones who carry stories that never made it to Instagram captions. The ones who have been crushed, misunderstood, left out, underestimated, but still carry the oil of survival. He chooses the woman who cried herself to sleep and still got up the next morning. The woman who didn't think she could take one more hit and still chose to love again. The woman who gave and gave until there was nothing left and somehow found a way to keep pouring. God uses that kind of woman, not because she's flawless, but because she's faithful. Not because she's never fallen, but because she refuses to stay down. He uses broken vessels, vessels that have cracks and dents and scars, because when the light shines through the cracks, glory gets revealed. Not your glory, but His, the kind of glory that doesn't make sense on paper, the kind of glory that shocks people who knew what you went through. The kind of glory that says, only God could have done that. That's the kind of life He's building in you. Not one that's filtered in Photoshop, but one that's real and redeemed. God doesn't ask for a perfect track record. He asks for surrendered pieces. He asks for the shattered hopes, the abandoned dreams, the disappointed prayers. He gathers up the parts you thought were useless and begins to craft something you never saw coming. He doesn't discard your weakness. He turns it into a testimony. He doesn't overlook your wounds. He uses them to heal others. There's nothing you've been through that He can't redeem. Nothing that disqualifies you from being used by Him. You think your past is a liability, but God sees it as preparation. Every tear you cried, every night you didn't think you'd make it, every moment you wanted to quit but kept going, that's not wasted. That's weight. That's oil. That's authority in the spirit. You didn't just survive. You were being shaped. You were being qualified in private for the purpose that's about to go public. Your pain wasn't punishment. It was process. It was training ground for a kind of strength that doesn't shake when storms come. A kind of discernment that only comes from being broken and still believing. Wisdom that comes from living through hell and still finding a way to speak life. God will use the things you were ashamed of, the parts of your story you hoped no one would find out. He'll bring beauty from ashes, not by erasing what happened, but by transforming how it ends. You are not the mistake. You are the miracle that came out of it. You are not what they did to you. You are what God is doing through you. And no matter how dark it's been, the light inside you is not gone. It's been waiting for your yes, waiting for your surrender, waiting for the moment when you stop trying to do it all on your own and say, God, I don't have much, but here's what I've got. God can work with that. He can work with your honesty. He can work with your brokenness. He can work with your doubt. He can work with your fear. As long as you're willing to bring it to him. Because when you bring the broken pieces, you're inviting him to be the potter again. To shape you, mold you, restore you. Not into what you used to be, but into who you were always meant to be. Someone powerful, someone anointed, someone who carries fire and healing in the same breath. The ones God uses don't have perfect resumes. They have painful testimonies. They have stories that make religious people uncomfortable. They have pasts that don't match their current favor, but they said yes anyway. They said yes with trembling hands. They said yes while people whispered. They said yes when they were still unsure of themselves, and God honored their yes. He covered their yes. He backed their yes with provision, with protection, with grace they didn't know they would need. Because your obedience doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real. There's a reason you've been through what you've been through. There's a reason your heart has been stretched the way it has. There's a reason you feel things deeply and carry others heavily. God has been preparing you for people who need your exact experience. People who don't need another cliche or Instagram quote. They need someone who's been in the dirt and still bloom. Someone who can say, I know what it's like to be her, and actually mean it. You've been assigned to a healing ministry you didn't even apply for. One that flows through conversation, through presence, through simply being honest about what God pulled you out of. You were never overlooked. You were being positioned. You were never forgotten. You were being fortified. And when God brings you into the next season, you won't need to prove anything to anyone. Your fruit will speak for itself. Your growth will testify. Your strength will shine without you having to shout. Because God uses the broken, the buried, and the brave, not because they're perfect, but because they're willing. Answering the call means shedding everything you built to survive. It means letting go of the mask you created to make other people comfortable. It means stepping out of the roles you were never meant to play and walking toward the identity God wrote over your life before you ever took your first breath. It's not just about doing something new. It's about becoming someone real. Becoming the version of you that isn't shaped by fear, but by faith. The version of you that isn't hiding behind what hurts you, but standing in what healed you. The version of you that refuses to let insecurity keep writing your story. It's not easy. It will cost you. It'll cost your comfort. It'll cost your pride. It'll cost your need for control. Because stepping into who God is calling you to be means leaving behind the places that no longer serve you. Leaving behind the people who can't handle your next level. Leaving behind the narratives that told you weren't enough. God is calling you higher, but you can't climb while you're still clinging to what broke you. You can't elevate and carry dead weight at the same time. There's a stripping that happens when you say yes to the call. A sacred unlearning. A divine disruption, not to harm you, but to heal you. And healing isn't glamorous. Sometimes healing looks like losing what you thought you couldn't live without. Sometimes it looks like standing alone in obedience when you used to be surrounded by people who celebrated your dysfunction. Sometimes healing looks like rebuilding your entire life on a foundation that doesn't shake every time the storm comes. God will call you to walk away from what's familiar, discover what's holy. He'll call you to close chapters that you tried to keep open out of fear. He'll call you to trust him more than you trust your own plans, because who you were is not who you're becoming. That version of you was necessary for that season, but she can't follow you where you're going. You can honor her without caring. You can thank her for surviving, but you don't have to keep living in survival mode. God is calling you into becoming, into evolving, into rising. And becoming will test you. It'll stretch you. It'll challenge everything you thought you knew. It'll expose the places in you that still need healing, not to shame you, but to prepare you. And when you start to walk in that new version of yourself, people won't always understand. They'll question the shift. They'll remind you of who you used to be. They'll try to pull you back into conversations, environments, and cycles that you've outgrown. That's how you'll know you're moving in the right direction. When the old life no longer fits. When your spirit starts rejecting what you used to tolerate. When your peace becomes more valuable than people pleasing. That's growth. That's purpose unfolding. That's God making room for the woman you're becoming. You won't always feel ready, but God doesn't call the ready. He calls the willing. He calls the surrendered. He calls the woman who says, I don't have it all figured out, but I trust you. The one who's tired of pretending. The one who's done with performance. The one who knows that she can't afford to waste any more time living beneath her calling. You've spent enough time rehearsing your limitations. Enough time trying to fit into boxes you were never meant to enter. Enough time dimming your light so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Now it's time to rise. It's time to take up space. It's time to walk like you know heaven wrote your name in fire. It's time to speak like your words carry healing. It's time to dream like you know your Father owns the whole sky. Stop apologizing for your anointing. Stop downplaying your gift to protect people's egos. Stop postponing your purpose out of fear of failure. God doesn't need you to be perfect. He needs you to be present. He needs you to be obedient. He needs you to show up fully flawed, unsure, scared if necessary, but fully. Because when you answer the call, heaven responds. Doors open. Chains break. Generations shift. When you say yes, you give permission to every woman connected to you to say yes to. You become a mirror that reflects possibility, a living testimony that shows what's possible when someone stops waiting for permission and starts walking in divine authority. The world doesn't need more people who look like everyone else. It needs you, the real you, the healed you, the whole you. The powerful you. You don't have to earn this call. You just have to embrace it. You don't have to prove anything. Just be willing. Just say yes. Yes to the process. Yes to the pain that produces purpose. Yes to the stretching that brings strength. Yes to the unknown that's held by a known God. Yes to the version of you that's been waiting to be unleashed. That yes will change everything. It will change how you see yourself. It will change how you pray. It will change what you tolerate. It will change the legacy you leave behind. Because when you answer the call, you don't just change your life. You change lives. You shift atmospheres. You break cycles. You become the woman you were always called to be.